If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is the podcast all about the movies you never saw, the scripts that were never filmed, and the ideas that never even made it to the page. My name is David Spencer.
And my name is Daniel Kaka.
And I am a golden god.
For real, though, who are you?
Yeah, I'm Eric Nash.
Eric Nash from Almost Famous Minute, another wonderful Movies by Minute podcast coming on to talk about this movie with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah, thank you guys. I've been a listener for a while. I think the whole run.
Nice.
A couple I haven't been too interested in hearing, but I go way back to the Weird Al days, too.
Right on.
Yay, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you, and I'm excited to get into what we're doing. Although, I have to admit, I'm a little confused. I don't know a whole ton of the details of what we're talking about today. But Dan was saying that, we're going to talk about something to do with Almost Famous. I'm here thinking, I'm pretty sure that movie was made, and I'm pretty sure I've seen that movie. So I'm not sure why we're talking about it on this podcast.
Well, David, you think that this movie got made, but there's actually been this collective hallucination, kind of like the Mandela effect, where we believe that it's made, but actually it wasn't. And we're here to tell that story.
Next, you're going to tell me that, also Jason Lee isn't real.
Okay.
Before we get into the story, though, I would love to know about doing Almost Famous Minute, how you guys started that, and how long it's been going for.
Coming from a love of Star Wars and Star Wars Minute, the first Movies Minute podcast that I found, and it's been amazing that we've had 3 annual meetups for the community of Movies by Minute. A little sidetracked this past year, but we hope to meet up again later this year.
We've talked about maybe we could do a Movies by Minute podcast, and I think having an excuse to have something for the Movies by Minute meetup, that's like the main motivation to do something.
I mean, it's a nice excuse, but you can just be a listener.
That's true.
That's all I was the first time I went to the first one, just as a listener. I really didn't have much of an idea. But, I did start formulating a few different ideas. And actually, my first show was Watchmen.
Okay.
Oh.
I had a great co-host for that who kind of approached me with the idea. I was like, are you big enough of a fan? Because sometimes it's not good if you're not a big fan.
Yeah.
Although, there's been some of these that I think are pretty good when one person is a big fan, the other one has never seen at all.
That was another idea we tossed around because our friend and co-host Michael over at Come On Fahoogwa Pods has never seen Memento. So we were talking about doing Memento Minute, but doing a random minute every time because, it's got short-term memory loss anyways. So let's just shuffle a random thing and see if Michael can figure out what's going on.
Brilliant. I would love if we actually did that, to have Michael sit down at the end of the movie and actually write out a treatment of what he thinks the actual movie is. And then he watches the movie himself to see how accurate he is.
The closest thing to that was the guy that had a lot of different guest hosts come on and take randomly assigned minutes for Dave Made a Maze.
I had a friend who worked on that movie. Yeah, it is amazing.
Really? Cool. Dave Made a Minute.
Oh, that's a great name for it.
But nonetheless, for Almost Famous, movies are something of a passion for me, but kind of even more so was music. And for my second one, hosting on my own, except I do have a fair amount of somewhat regular co-hosts that actually have no real responsibilities. They're just very knowledgeable people about the movie and have a lot of great ideas and thoughts. Then I have my third podcast, which is much like your own Weird Alphabet, which just feels like Weezer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's chronologically going through. They're still putting out stuff, even though Weird Al's still putting out stuff.
Yeah.
We'll revisit that eventually. Hopefully.
Yeah, eventually, hopefully.
I'm curious about why you chose Almost Famous and not say any other music-based
music movie.
Yeah. So why not Spinal Tap or why not The Unfortunate Rock Star?
That was already being done at that point.
Yeah.
They're definitely done being done. They've gone through the whole movie. But no, I mean, it's one that popped in my head. There's other movies that I probably might kind of capture, kind of do like within the end credits minutes. Like School of Rock. I've never seen 8 Mile. And High Fidelity.
Oh, yes.
Those three I could go over in the end credits minutes. Yeah, it's just one that's really stood out for me. I mean, it's not just rock either. There is this journalism aspect as well as a family aspect. I think it's really special that way.
It's just so well beloved. But it was considered a flop when it came out in theaters.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Even though Cameron Crowe did win the Oscar for screenwriting.
Whenever a movie can have like a few different stories that kind of tackle different ideas from different angles, like it makes it really, really strong. I've been watching a lot of music biopics lately over the holidays. Like we just sat around and watched movies constantly. And, you know, a few music biopics in there. And like those always tend to be like a really sanitized story. It's trying to put certain members in the best light as possible, and then they follow the same beats every single time. Almost Famous is able to like tell a story about a band that feels truer because it isn't tied down to real people and trying to make real people look good or bad or whatever. And it doesn't really have the same kind of agenda that a movie like Bohemian Rhapsody might have.
They are a made-up band. It's Stillwater, even though there was a real Stillwater. And the thing is that everything that happens in the movie apparently did happen for various different bands.
To bring back to Golden God.
I am a golden god! Yeah!
There was some artist who actually yelled that one night. Who was that?
That was Robert Plant.
Oh, right. He was watching it in the movie theater. He's like, I said that. Hey.
I knew that a lot of this movie is based off of Cameron Crowe's real life experiences, but I didn't realize that it was that many details were, you know, one for one lifted from reality. That's kind of wild.
I've been listening to Pop Culture Happy Hour, and they recently did an episode all about Almost Famous because it's the 20th anniversary. There was the Origins podcast that came out that interviewed all of the cast members and Cameron Crowe himself. I mean, these people at NPR, they were looking at it and they're like, you know, the most unbelievable thing is that someone would pay $1,000 to a journalist and have them follow around a band for like what seems like their entire tour. If you were an actual music journalist, you would go to maybe a concert, you would have one interview with the artist, and you would get maybe like $150 for that article, and that's it. All right, so let's go into this. I should mention that we are talking about an Almost Famous movie that nearly got made. It was a proposed idea before then. We'll go into what that was. So for this episode, I'm calling this Almost Famous.
Now, when you say before then, you're saying this is an idea that was being shopped around or worked out before they actually made the movie. Like it wasn't an intentional sequel or anything like that.
No, this was supposed to be like the movie to go for, and Cameron Crowe was almost set and determined to make this film, but you'll see why he chose against it. So Almost Famous, for one, is one of the best coming-of-age stories with a little mix of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The movie is about 15-year-old William Miller.
How old are you?
18?
Me too. How old are we really?
17.
Me too.
Actually, I'm 16.
Me too. Isn't it funny? The truth just sounds different.
I'm 15.
Who gets a job for Rolling Stone magazine to write a cover piece on the band Stillwater. What makes the movie more fascinating is that it's based on a real story about the Almost Famous director Cameron Crowe when he wrote a cover piece about the Allman Brothers when he was only 16 years old and writing for Rolling Stone.
And if anybody hasn't seen this movie, as of now, as of the time we're recording, it is currently on Amazon Prime. And I checked this morning and it will be on Amazon Prime for 13 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
It's coming out real soon.
it was great timing for me. Maybe not so great timing for listeners.
Wow, we got really lucky.
Yeah. I also own the DVD, but it's easier to just pull it up on streaming sometimes. But even if it isn't on a streaming service, if you haven't seen it, it's absolutely worth the rent, at least.
Yeah, it is a great movie. I don't have any kids right now, but if I were to have any kids and I wanted to show them any sort of like coming of age story, coming of age like movie, TV show, Almost Famous would be one of them, and Freaks and Geeks is another one of those. And both of them have like this really similar tone of like, how do you grow up and embrace pop culture that's around you while trying to find your footing and trying to find who you actually are. Both of them are great stories for that.
Yeah.
Now, with our podcast, we typically talk about films that don't get made. But if you've listened to our show before, you know it's not always that simple. Yes, Almost Famous is a movie that got made, but there is a lot of decisions that were made along the way. The cult classic would not be the film that we know today. Actually, we never actually mentioned this before. Eric, the reason why you are here is because you actually sent us an email saying, hey, did you know about this Almost Famous movie where David Bowie nearly played a band's publicist, and he was based on the actual Beatles publicist, Derek Taylor?
Oh, whoa.
So that's why we have you here. I have been looking further into the story, and this movie nearly starred Meryl Streep, Brad Pitt, and Natalie Portman. It would have been a vastly different movie had it been with those three.
You want to rebel against knowledge. I'm trying to give you the cliff notes on how to live life in this world.
We're like nobody else I know.
Cameron Crowe, he was born on July 13th, 1957 in Palm Springs, California, but primarily raised in San Diego. His mother recognized that her son was incredibly smart and even pushed him ahead in his schooling, first skipping kindergarten and then passing over 2 grades in elementary school.
How old
And when he rebels in some strange and odd way, don't blame me.
am I?
I skipped you an extra grade. You're 11.
11?
So you skipped 5th grade. There's too much padding in the grades. I taught elementary school.
11!
You also skipped kindergarten because I taught it to you when you were 4.
Cameron gravitated to music, even though his parents didn't allow rock and roll in the house.
It's unfair that we can't listen to our music.
It's because it is about drugs and promiscuous sex.
His first concert, which was Iron Butterfly, happened because he won tickets from a local radio station, and he even started a band, which was called The Masked Hamster, which didn't go anywhere, but for Cameron, it was a way for him to experience music firsthand. He did feel a lot of alienation while in school. He was much younger than his classmates. On top of that, he was diagnosed with a kidney disease, nephritis. As a way to cope with his lack of social interactions, he began writing for the school paper when he was only 13 years old. He contributed music reviews for an underground newspaper, the San Diego Door, and even tried his own newspaper, Common Sense. Crowe began expanding his work and submitting articles primarily to Cream, but also to Penthouse, Playboy, Crawdaddy, Music World, Circus, and the Los Angeles Times. At this time, Cameron was corresponding with mostly Lester Bangs, who had left the San Diego Door and was the editor for Cream magazine.
Oh, I didn't realize that Lester Bangs was a real person.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
After Cameron graduated at the age of 15, in 1972. That's crazy. I remember seeing on Reddit like years ago that someone had graduated when they were only 16 years old. And I'm like, that is nuts. But yeah, he graduated when he was only 15 years old in 1972. While on a trip to LA, he met Rolling Stone editor Ben Fong Torres. Even though Cameron was rejected at first, he was eventually brought on to write about the Allman Brothers, who at the time were dealing with the loss of their guitarist Duane Allman and bassist Barry Oakley, who had both died separately of motorcycle accidents. The story was so interesting because they continued to tour and make music even though they had lost some of their greatest musicians. The big takeaway from this was an interview that he had with Greg Allman. He has a recorder with him. He records Greg for this long form interview. I should mention that Greg is notorious for not doing interviews at all. So the fact that Cameron was actually able to get an interview with Greg was a huge deal. After Cameron had got all he needed to start writing the article, and then soon after, he gets a call from one of Greg Allman's roadies to go back up to his room and bring all of his tapes with him because Greg has somehow become paranoid.
Oh, whoa.
He says, bring the tapes, bring your notebook, bring your ID. Cameron went back to the room. Greg looked like he was sweating profusely and started asking him questions like if he was a cop or if he was an FBI.
How do we know you're not a cop? Huh?
And then he actually had to show Greg his ID. And Greg looked at it and he's realized how young he was, which I'm curious. I should actually look up what a young photo of Cameron Crowe actually looks like, because I'm wondering if it's like a Frank Abagnale situation, because he was pretty young when he started like impersonating other people. And the reason why he could do that is he said that when he was much younger, like when he was 15 years old, he looked like a much older adult. So I'm wondering if Cameron Crowe kind of has that ability about him. But yeah, he looked at his ID and he's like, he's just a kid. Because he was in this paranoid state, he's like, I could turn you in because we brought you into bars. We brought you into all these places and you're underage. And Cameron, he went right back at him. He's like, you've been telling me stories about how your brothers have been sneaking you into bars when you were a kid, when you were my age as well. So like, we're in the same boat here. You can't do this to me. So yeah. Greg also stated that his brother was sitting in a chair in the room and was actually laughing at camera. The chair was empty and it was suspicious that Greg had been going through some sort of paranoid episode. He may have been doing drugs that night. So yeah. But anyway, Greg's actually seized all the tapes. And Cameron kept one tape, and it was actually a recording of Greg singing the Jackson Browne song These Days. Cameron was distraught because if Greg kept or even destroyed the tapes, there's no story and there's no future at Rolling Stone. Cameron got back to his hotel and he was bunking with Neil Preston, who was a great photographer. He's a concert photographer, a rock and roll photographer. I believe that a lot of the imagery that you see in Almost Famous actually comes from Neil's photos. Cameron told Neil what happened, and Neil told him that, don't worry, I'm going to get the tapes, accepting the fact that basically they're gone forever. So he went to the San Francisco airport, where he luckily ran into his sister, who was a flight attendant, and got him home. Greg had gone to Hawaii. Neil followed him to Hawaii and eventually asked Greg for those tapes. And Greg ended up responding with, I don't even know why I have them. Yeah, he definitely was on drugs. Neil had the tapes and flew them back to Cameron. Cameron couldn't admit to Ben Fong Tours what happened, but the tapes were securely in his possession, and he finally was able to write the story about the Allman Brothers. Cameron would continue working for Rolling Stone and would write articles about Bob Dylan, David Bowie, Neil Young, Eric Clapton, and the members of Led Zeppelin.
The obstacle there of this kind of drug-fueled paranoia, that seems like the kind of thing that would be easier to make a story out of than the conflict just being like a good guy's kind of pride and ego type of thing, and like how it is in the movie. And with the way it is in the movie, that's how you can draw it out for 2 hours. But I could easily see somebody saying, oh, no, this drug-fueled paranoia, that's a way better story. That's the movie that we should make. Yeah. And probably wouldn't have been as good and as meaningful.
Yeah.
That drug-fueled paranoia, that is encapsulated in a very short scene. Russell freaks out on William and calls him a cop, and you're taking notes with your eyes. There's no tapes in that part of the scene, but there are definitely this recording device that William keeps carrying around, and it's this weird shifting around a little bit of things, but the overall idea, I think, is somewhat there, that Russell is not wanting to give an interview.
I really applaud Cameron Crowe for being able to shape this type of story, and I'm so happy that he made it more of a fictional story and taking these real life elements and really putting them in where he had them. He kind of took his life and he's like, okay, I'm not going to tell the Cameron Crowe story. As interesting as that may be, and as interested as I am in that, I don't think it really serves well as like a 3-act structure. He's wanting to write that article, but it's so hard to write a movie about writing. There are a few out there, but in actuality, like, what are you going to do? You're just going to watch this kid sit there at a typewriter for 2 hours as he's clickety-clacking away. It's like that's...
Just do it like adaptation. You just have Nicolas Cage pacing back and forth, shouting into a tape recorder. That's how you make a movie about writing.
Yeah. And I think it's just so difficult to really show that process. With Almost Famous, like, Crowe is really great at being able to take all these elements and be like, all right, where can they be best served? So when Rolling Stone moved their offices to New York in 1977, Crowe decided to stay behind, continuing to freelance for the magazine, but thought it might be time to change his career. He didn't immediately go into the film industry, but he did make a small appearance in the 1978 film American Hot Wax. Instead, he wanted to focus on his writing and what it was like to be a teen in the 1970s. In 1979, Cameron returned back to high school as a senior for research. He was 22 years old at that time, so I don't know if this is like, what's that Drew Barrymore movie where she poses as a reporter in a high school? Never Been Kissed, was it? I think it was.
That sounds familiar.
Am I the only one that watched Never Been Kissed?
I haven't. Nope, sorry.
I think I've seen a few minutes here or there.
It's been parodied before. If you saw Not Another Teen Movie, they definitely parody it of like someone who is a reporter trying to like sneak into a high school. Or I think Kevin Bacon, I believed, went to a high school in order to prepare for Footloose. That's what it was. He was preparing for Footloose. He decided to go to a high school to prepare himself for that. And immediately he was called out. And they're like, no, you're an adult. You are not a student. So I have a feeling that may have happened there.
So weird for Cameron Crowe with what you're suspecting before, that he looked older than he was when he was younger at 15, 16 years old. But then when he's 22, he apparently seems to look younger than he is.
If I shave my face, I lose like 10 years. So maybe it's that situation. He had used that experience to write the book Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The book was a bestseller, and Universal Pictures jumped on the opportunity to adapt the book into a film with a screenplay written by Crowe himself, which then went on to be nominated for a Writers Guild of America Award for Best Screen Adaptation. Although Cameron was entering into the world of Hollywood, he would go back to his roots when he penned liner notes for Led Zeppelin, Eagles, Joni Mitchell, David Bowie, Peter Frampton, and Leonard Skinner, and was even nominated for a Grammy for his work on the Bob Dylan's Biograph box set. Even throughout his career, he's directed music videos for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Alice in Chains, and Paul Westerberg, and has directed a documentary for Pearl Jam and Elton John in Leon Russell's collaborative album Union. After Fast Times, Cameron went on to write The Wildlife, but he finally got his directorial debut when he got a chance to make his film Say Anything. He would go on to write and direct Singles, Jerry Maguire, and the movie that we are talking about today, Almost Famous. In the first draft of Almost Famous, which was called Fedora or Ricky Fedora, the idea was to cast David Bowie and write a movie that he could star in. He wanted him to play an eccentric publicist for a British artist similar to Peter Frampton named Ricky Fedora. But after the release of Austin Powers, the characters just seemed too close to each other, and there was no other way to take this character seriously.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
He went into this specifically wanting to make a movie with David Bowie. Like, that just seems like an excellent reason to make a movie. I don't know what it's going to be. I just want to make a movie with David Bowie. Got to do an obligatory BoJack Horseman reference whenever I see fit. But they have a scene in there with Cameron Crowe, who in this universe is a raven. Princess Carolyn is trying to sell him on a book to make into a movie called Suffragette City, named after the Bowie song. And then the subtitle for the book is a coming-of-age story about rock music, being a teenager in the 80s, and buying zoos. So it's the perfect movie for Cameron Crowe to direct.
I often forget that he directed I Bought a Zoo.
Yep.
I've heard that it is an endearing movie, and I'm sure it's good. It's just the title of the film maybe needs to be reworked. It just sounds like a Disney original weird special.
Yeah.
So that's why. This was the movie that was about to get made, Ricky Fedora or Fedora. We don't actually know which one that was. Eric, do you have any more on this film?
The bigger idea, I think, was Ricky Fedora based on Peter Frampton. Not quite as much of an amalgamation of bands that Stillwater became, but definitely still not biographical, not using the name of Peter Frampton. And then the other crazy thing we really haven't talked a whole lot about was Penny Lane. And she herself also is this amalgamation, although there are plenty that want to say Miss Pamela DeBars. She claims to be the heaviest inspiration for Penny Lane. Kate Hudson, the actress who plays Penny Lane, and she supposedly took the book that Pamela DeBars wrote in the 80s I'm with the band took so much inspiration. Still, apparently in this first draft, possibly called Ricky Fedora. I don't even know that we're totally sure about that.
I mean, Cameron Crowe's not even sure about that.
Yeah, right. But Penny Lane apparently was the lead female star and would have been Fedora's love interest there. But it would have been a smaller role, though.
Huh. Yeah, and she's such a huge part of Almost Famous. Like, if you took out
the poster.
Yeah, if you took out Penny Lane, like, the story would still have gotten written, but she's inserted and plays such a pivotal role in the movie. It's just so hard to imagine this movie without her. So, because of Austin Powers, I don't know if I want to be angry at Austin Powers for taking this movie away from us, because I love that movie so much, but what could have been?
With this Ricky Fedora movie, it seems like it was much more about the publicity game of rock and roll, but with some side stuff going on with journalists. The journalists apparently were supposed to be John Cusack and Parker Posey.
So that forced Cameron to do a rewrite. The idea of this story took place from a publicist's point of view, but then he changed it to a journalist, because something that Crowe is familiar with is being a journalist. So why not write a story about that? And then eventually he changed the name of the movie from Ricky Fedora to The Journalist. Not so great.
But then at some point, though, he also really preferred Untitled.
So Untitled, if you don't know, is a nod to Led Zeppelin's fourth album. And because the film is about a journalist like Cameron, it naturally became more autobiographical. Although he didn't want the character William Miller to be like him.
Is he still thinking about David Bowie at this time? Do we know?
I don't think he is. I think because of Austin Powers,
that was even like completely okay.
In his brain, it was like, I need to make a movie where I could utilize David Bowie, because David Bowie's great. So why not find an excuse to have more time with him? It's kind of like with James Cameron, where he's like, you know what I'd really like to see? The Titanic. How can I convince a studio to pay for me to see the Titanic? How can I get a studio to pay for me to hang out with David Bowie for like a whole month or so?
I also love the idea of casting David Bowie, because his film career is so interesting and varied, and like he's just done such strange various roles. But has he ever been in a movie about music? Like, ever played a sort of rock star character? Like, because I can't think of any movie, even a movie where he's tangentially related to being a rock star. And I love the idea of him being in a movie about a rock star, but not playing the rock star.
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
The closest things you could get, it would be something like Labyrinth.
Yeah.
It's more of a musical, so you're getting both his acting and his musical abilities.
He's playing a Goblin King who happens to sing and dance, not playing a musician. So yeah, like Labyrinth is the closest that we really have to that.
Yep.
As far as the band for this film, Cameron Crowe wanted to do an American band instead and drew inspiration from the Eagles and Leonard Skinner. Throughout the film, we follow the fictional band Stillwater. Turns out is a actual band name. They were around, or they were active in the 70s and the 80s. It was a complete coincidence. So the producers had to obtain the rights to use that name. The guitarist to the real Stillwater band stated they could have probably done it without our permission, but they probably would have had a bunch of lawsuits. Our lawyer got in touch with them. They wanted us to do it for free, and I said, no, we're not doing it for free. So we got a little bit of change for that. To help with creating music for the movie, they hired Peter Frampton. He was a technical consultant, and he wrote 2 songs with the help of Pearl Jam's lead guitarist, Mike McCready.
Well, and then the other thing with Frampton is he then also was in this movie twice. He's in the hotel lobby there when they get to LA at the Riot House at the poker gambling scene. There's actually a fair amount of comedians that are put in throughout the movie.
I'm surprised by how many comedic actors and comedians are in there. So like Jason Lee coming from Mallrats, comedic actor, professional skateboarder before then.
Well, the great thing with him is that he actually had some good musical ability too.
And then you got someone like Jimmy Fallon coming in as the manager in there. But yeah, going to the poker scene, I think I know where you're going with this, because I have my suspicion as to who you're going to say.
So Peter Frampton's there at one end of the table. At the other end is...
Mitch Hedberg?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I'm an older guy than you two. I'm losing my brain cells.
I only bring it up because like Mitch Hedberg is one of my favorite comedians of all time. And like, unfortunately, like he passed away like most rock and roll stars do with a drug overdose. I think he was pretty young. He was like 37, I believe, when he passed away. For him to be in the movie, I think in the deleted scenes, he said something like donkey dick or something.
Yeah. There's definitely one person that is real. The legendary Red Dog.
You know, Red Dog. Hi, brother!
A roadie for Allman Brothers.
The other 5 songs were written by Crowe and his wife. Who at the time was Nancy Wilson, who was the rhythm guitarist, the backing and occasional lead vocalist of the band Heart. So yeah, that's really convenient to be married to a rock star, to be like, hey, I need to write music. And they're like, oh, actually, you know what my specialty is? While in pre-production, Cameron was certain that Brad Pitt was going to star as the lead guitarist Russell Hammond, a character based on Glenn Frey from the Eagles. But for reasons not fully known, he dropped out of the movie. Crowe was set on Brad being in his next film after Jerry Maguire, even promising to make that happen. The role would eventually go to Billy Crudup, which most of us know him as Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen. The film was filled with a lot of unknown actors at the time, and the guess is that Brad Pitt's agent didn't think that there was enough money for Pitt to be paid his worth, and Brad was not comfortable with the age difference between Russell and Penny. Again, we don't exactly know the reason why he dropped it, but those are kind of the suspicions there. Another casting choice that nearly happened was Meryl Streep as Elaine Miller, William's mother, which ended up going to Frances McDormand.
Meryl Streep would have been interesting in that role, but I don't think it would have been nearly as good as Frances McDormand. McDormand just like is so ferocious in the types of roles that she plays, which adds like such a fantastic dimension to that character. I rewatched it again for the first time in a couple of years to prep for this podcast, and that was one thing that really stuck out to me is how good Frances McDormand is in this movie. Especially that phone call scene.
He's not ready for your world of compromised values and diminished brain cells that you throw away like confetti. Am I speaking to you clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
If you break his spirit, harm him in any way, keep him from his chosen profession, which is law, something you may not value, but I do, you will meet the voice at the other end of this telephone, and it will not be pretty. Do we understand each other?
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't ask for this role, but I'll play it.
I hear that to this day, if people pass by her in the street, people will see her and say, don't do drugs.
I'm surprised that that's the role that like she's most known for, but I guess that makes sense.
For the character Penny Lane, it first went to Natalie Portman, which I guess when they did a lot of the script development, whenever Cameron Crowe was testing out or having it read out loud, he actually had Brad Pitt and Natalie Portman read for him.
Kate Hudson, she was definitely the biggest person in this movie.
I mean, everyone was like, that's Goldie Hawn's daughter. It's unfortunate that that is the thing that you're known for, but so her character originally supposed to go to Sarah Polley, who actually dropped out at the last second. That's where Kate Hudson came in. She was only 19 years old at the time. And she was at this moment, and it's really interesting in the Origins podcast, they did an interview with her. And she was at this moment in her life where she had to decide, is she going to be part of the entertainment industry, something that her parents have been a part of, or is she going to stray away from it? And because of this movie, this is really the reason why she stuck with acting.
She came into the picture. Well, actually, she kind of was already in the picture as William's sister.
Yes. When Polly dropped out of it, they rearranged it and was like, okay, so you're going to go from sister to Penny, which is a much bigger role. And that's where they found a little known actress named Zooey Deschanel.
I can't live here. I hate you. Even William hates you. I don't hate her. You do hate her. You don't even know the truth.
Sweetheart, don't be a drama queen.
Frick you!
While the film was in production, the film was still called Untitled, which DreamWorks was not very happy with. So Jimmy Fallon, he's the guy who plays the manager, Dennis Hope.
I didn't invent the rainy day, man. I just own the best umbrella.
He offered a few titles for the movie. Cameron Crowe actually posted the note that he got from Jimmy Fallon, like the handwritten note of all of those suggestions. And if you're wondering if I read that note and typed it all down, I did. So here are the list of the supposed names of this movie. I'm with the band, set to music, The Kids With Us, The Volleyball Incident, Some Reshoots Required, Gather No Moss. I really like that one.
That's pretty good.
Vinyl Days, Pages, The Vinyl Years. Is Fred Savage available? Whenever I do that, that's actually in parentheses as notes. Writing on Rock, The B-Sides, What Music Can Do, Vinyl Reality, that I really enjoy. Rock and Roll, who else can make a movie called this? Really no. The Slip Slide, I'm on the list. The 33 1/3 incher, The Days of Vinyl and Hoses, Groupies, LPs and Nipsies. Is Nipsey Russell available? Doing It, Nothing Up My Sleeve, except for my new record. Doing It 2, The Neil Preston Story, Educated, Doing It 3, This Time It's Personal, The Kelly Curtis Chronicles, Episode 1, in which we find out Kelly's secret identity. And Herman Isn't in This, written in crayon, primary colors only, please. So yeah, that's the suggestions. And Cameron Crowe probably looked at it and was like, that's funny. No. I actually have the Twitter story right here. So Crowe answered the question on Twitter from news anchor Jake Tapper about the title. And he said, it was David Geffen's idea. It wasn't his first choice. He really liked My Opening Farewell, which that one works as well. David Geffen, if you don't know, is an executive over at DreamWorks. Other titles that were considered by Cameron Crowe, though, were Tangerine, My Back Pages, Original Cover, Coda, and more. And I really couldn't find any more of those. Eric, do you actually know any other titles for this film other than the 50 that I just listed off?
Almost Famous. I mean, the big thing with that is that it actually is the name of the tour that they're doing. They're not headlining this tour. They're opening for Black Sabbath.
Is this correct that the director's cut is actually called the Untitled Cut?
Well, it's actually called Untitled, the Bootleg Cut.
Oh, okay.
And some people actually get thrown a little bit by that. And
yeah, it certainly threw me. The DVD copy I own is the one with the Untitled Cut. And that was definitely something where I saw that and was like, is there some legal reason why they couldn't use Almost Famous as the title for this cut and they had to call it Untitled or something like that? It certainly threw me.
If you didn't know the history that we know, it makes absolutely no sense at all why it would be called that. I really love the title Almost Famous because there are so many different aspects to it. Like you said, that the band is opening for Black Sabbath. So they're not there just yet, but this band in this transition from being a band that opens for someone else to eventually becoming their own band and eventually becoming the headliner. But also you're dealing with people who are behind the scenes. You are dealing with the reporter who is there witnessing all of these things, and he's just off to the sidelines. You have the Band-Aids who are there as well. You don't know any of these people, but they are right there on the line of being famous.
I mean, for me, what that title makes me think of is the uncool scene with Lester Bangs and that whole phone call.
You made friends with him. See, friendship is the booze they feed you, as they want you to get drunk and feeling like you belong.
Well, it was fun.
Because they make you feel cool. And hey, I met you. You are not cool.
I know. Even when I thought I was, I knew I wasn't.
Right, because we are uncool.
That's what that title seems emblematic of, and it's kind of that scene is kind of what's anchoring the themes of the whole movie, and the idea that it's better to be almost famous than to be actually famous.
The Uncool, that was another one in his head, but he's actually apparently glad now because it's a great name for his website.
It would be great if he named this movie One Day You'll Be Cool, and eventually explains why this movie flopped when it came to the theaters and eventually became a cult classic. So the film eventually got released on September 22nd in the year 2000. Unfortunately, like I mentioned before, it was a flop, grossing only $2.1 million. The opening weekend was overshadowed by the re-release of The Exorcist. Not even a new movie, a re-release of The Exorcist, in which they put in the subtitle things that said the version you've never seen. Even though the movie didn't get its initial success, it does have this cult status and has become this movie that is really well beloved.
I mean, they don't even know what it is to be a fan. You know, to truly love some silly little piece of music or some band so much that it hurts.
Cameron Crowe was talking about David Bowie and trying to fit him into the movie. He ran into him at a party. It was like a premiere party that they were having. And he ran into David Bowie and he said that
there was a character based on you, that I had written for a really long time. There was a character that was going to be you. And he's like, I think it's fine. It's fine the way it is.
Right after that, he had promised that he was going to put him into his next film. And it was unfortunate that he was not able to do that because, unfortunately, David Bowie passed away before Cameron Crowe got that chance to actually put him into a film.
What I read was that he was getting ready to write some other movie that he could put David Bowie in.
On June 18th, 2015, Cameron actually attended Greg Allman's concert in Del Mar, California, with Neil Preston, the photographer that got his tapes back. Later, after the concert, Cameron got to speak with Greg for the first time since he did a story back in 1973. Crowe got the chance to say, "Thank you for Almost Famous," in which Greg replied, "You're welcome." And that was the final conversation that they ever had. So yeah, that is the story of Ricky Fedora, the Bowie movie that we nearly had, and had it not been for Austin Powers, we could have seen it.
Well, maybe there's a way that idea can be brought around again. And then, as much as I love Cameron Crowe, let's get Duncan Jones involved into it. I wonder if Duncan Jones has any feelings about doing a project related to his father, which is another just interesting thing to me about like how many different film directors have connections to David Bowie.
Apparently it's got a 180-page script. It's a page a minute is my understanding, so that's 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's actually a little bit in line with the director's cut, 2 hours and 42 minutes. It's about 40 or so minutes of extra footage. And that doesn't even include the Stairway to Heaven scene.
What's the Stairway to Heaven scene? I don't know if I'm familiar with this.
After William's sister Anita playing the song America, William does something similar, mimicking that, where he plays Stairway to Heaven to explain why he needs to go on the road.
I wish to disprove the prevailing false belief that rock music is based on drugs and sex. True, perhaps at one time, but rock music is different now. Rock music is now performed by hardworking intellectuals with blazing intellectual pursuits. And I am now going to play for you a piece of music designed to show you that my thesis is correct. The song is based on the literature of Tolkien.
It's like a 3 or 4 year jump from when Anita leaves. So in the scene, her boyfriend has come back and like a guidance counselor. So like 3 or 4 people are sitting there and they just all silently jam out. And not his mother, though, especially. But she ends up certainly agreeing to him going on the road with the band. The reason we have all that extra deleted scene footage is because Cameron Crowe had the opportunity to show the script to Steven Spielberg. Spielberg apparently heavily advised to him shoot every bit of dialogue. Not necessarily every scene, but seemingly every bit of dialogue was shot. And that's why we have the untitled director's cut.
I like the idea that they cut out the Stairway to Heaven scene. I feel like that would have dragged on. I get it for the sense of the sister to put on the album to be like, okay, Mom, this is how I'm going to express myself. Here is a song to explain why I'm leaving. And then for her to go through that again, it just seems like, all right, well, if I need to convince Frances McDormand of anything, I just need to put on a song and she'll allow me to do anything. Yeah. I went through all of my notes. David, do you have anything else to add?
I got nothing else to add. You got anything else to add, Eric?
The possibility of this happening, I think, is unfortunately slim. Apparently, Fox would have been involved. Cameron Crowe apparently said in an interview, whenever there's a contract, it lives forever. One of the head honchos that was there at Fox at this point, he apparently did give it back to Cameron Crowe.
I've heard of studios, especially with Disney, whenever you pitch anything with Disney, they are the ones who now own it. So like Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, the reason why it was produced through Disney, because most people are shocked that Disney ever did something like that. And that was because when he was an animator there, he pitched the idea for Nightmare Before Christmas. Disney rejected the idea, but after that, they're like, yeah, but this is now ours. And Tim Burton just had to walk away from it. And eventually they came around to actually making it. And yeah, that whole story is crazy.
I feel like I wouldn't want to see, Ricky Fedora or whatever. If you are focusing more on the rock and roll aspect, that story Cameron Crowe has already told with Almost Famous. If you were to focus more on the being an agent aspect, I mean, that story's kind of been told with Jerry Maguire. The two halves of this movie, granted, Jerry Maguire came out before Almost Famous, and so I imagine in this treatment, he would have focused more on the rock and roll aspect, so it wasn't treading the same ground or similar ground as Jerry Maguire. I just feel like the two halves of this story have kind of already been told. And I wonder if the story that Cameron Crowe was working on to eventually work out with David Bowie before he passed away, I imagine it would be something almost entirely different than Ricky Fedora could have been, just simply because, you don't want to tell the same story twice.
If anything, I think it could have been more for David Bowie, but kind of tells something of the David Bowie story. I mean, I think especially how David changed his persona so frequently, Even
if it was a movie about David Bowie, to have David Bowie not playing the character based on himself, it makes me think of the movie Honey Boy that came out last year, where Shia LaBeouf.
Wait, are you talking about real life cannibal Shia LaBeouf?
Actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah. That movie's really interesting because it's Shia LaBeouf is playing his own father, essentially. I love the idea of somebody in a movie about them, but not playing the character that's a stand-in for themselves, but playing somebody next to him.
What I described is actually already has been done. I'm not there.
Oh, are you talking about that Bob Dylan movie?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie. I really need to.
So where you have the different actors playing him at these different points in his life.
That is one of those music biopics that I've heard is nothing like a typical music biopic, and you really need to watch.
The biggest ones recently, Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocket Man. Well, I like Bohemian Rhapsody awfully well, and there's certainly plenty that don't. Rocket Man, I think, gets some love because it doesn't do quite what a normal biopic does. It has these fantastical elements to it.
I just saw Love and Mercy recently, which is about Brian Wilson, and that's another one that does some things a little differently, and I really appreciated that movie. I guess that's going to go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you so much, Eric, for being on the show with us.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah, if people want to find more of your podcast and what you got going on, where can they find that?
You can just go straight to our network site, which is pantheonpodcast.com. The two shows that I have there, Almost Famous Minute and Feels Like Weezer. My old show was a Watchmen Minute. Besides covering the 2009 Zack Snyder film, when the HBO show came about, we did that one episode at a time, not 1 minute. Is that what we're taking the rest of our lives to? But like I said, pantheonpodcast.com as well.
Well, you can find more of this podcast by going to our website, pipedreampodcast.com, where you can also find some of our other shows like Escape from Walt Disney and Come On Fahoogwapods and The Weird Alphabet. You can also email us, notgetmade@gmail.com. Suggest for us other movies that you would love to see us cover. Just like Almost Famous, it'll probably end up in season 3. You can also find us on social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram at HDTNGM. That's for Twitter.
Yep.
And on Instagram, we are How Did This Not Get Made? And finally, we do have a Patreon page if you would like to support us that way. For $2 and up, you get a special monthly show. And for $5 and up, you get access to all of Dan's notes and some other awesome perks. That's going to go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Eric, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Looking on, she sings the song.
I'm not going to sing for you, Dan. I'm sorry.
The word she knows, the tune she hums.
Mostly because I don't know the lyrics.
I have it pulled up here. That's the only reason why I know it.